We have given you quite a lot of information, and I suppose that you have not just caught it all. It's a lot of data. We have also persons and people who are attending the meeting, but not in these localities, because as you know, we are sending it also outside this building. Unfortunately, these people have not a chance to put questions because we have no chance to both have streaming and also have connecting over the internet here. But if you have questions on this, you remember then, if you are sitting somewhere else around in Europe, that you always can reach us during the information way on the website. So you can send in questions there, and all the slides will also be on the website, so you can sit back home somewhere and think and also formulate questions. Just send it to us and we will answer on the information base, the help desk that we have on the PREFORMA website. So, the streaming browser could be downloaded also from the website. So if you have missed something, you can just repeat it again. If you like the show, you can take it once more time. Or two. But you who are actually attending the meeting here, you can have a chance now to represent all the interested parties here, suppliers. And it's a lot of information, but I suppose you have a lot of questions also. You have a chance to discuss more in details after lunch, but questions and answers, quick questions, whatever. There are no dummy questions. It's just put them up and we try to answer them and discuss them here. Shall we let the word be free here and see if we have someone who will start? Don't be shy. Okay.
I heard a lot about process, but I would like to hear more about the detailed problem we are going to solve. Is it only conformance tools? What about the issues?
We had, I think that Bert has in his first slides some of this. Conformance in the sense that, yes, we need to know what we are getting into the repositories. That is depending, independently if they are an archives, a museum, or a library. But more in details, I think that Bert can answer. Can you please put the question again so everyone hear it?
Yes, I would like to have more information about the problem area we are going to solve. We heard a lot about the processes and a few examples, high levels, but maybe some scenarios would be nice.
Well, we did in the first month a little bit of a survey, reality check on what are the problems of the users, as you call them, and with users I interpret them as like, what are the problems of the memory institutions at this moment? Of course, we described the whole problematic of conformance checking and why you need to do it. What we saw is that particularly smaller institutions are not able, they're now creating a lot of digital content, sometimes just simple raster images, digital representations. Libraries there, they deal with the problem that material is deposited, so they just must accept material. And for the moment, what they all do, what they're able to do, is like storing the material in a safe way, in a sustainable way. And if you, the first section on what are you doing as to digital preservation, as to preserving that content, they talk about, okay, we store it on a server, we make backups, and then we ask, do you do checks on conformance, whether the file is valid? Do you produce checksums? Do you check the integrity? Yes, some of them do integrity checking. But then if you go further and you say, okay, at a certain moment you have to migrate from this file, from this format, this encoding, to another format in order to be able to open it. We found that when it comes down to like museums in this consortium and libraries, none of the institutions is actually able to do that because they simply do not have the tools available for the moment. So if you say, well, yeah, what is the real problem that institutions have? I'm referring now to smaller institutions, and to do any sort of checking whether they know what is in a file, and then have the information to establish a strategy to migrate it to another format. I think if you say what's the concrete user problem, I think that's the main problem. We've dealt it in the presentation. Can further elaborate on it, but that's the key problem. The fact that smaller institutions, memory institutions, underfunded institutions, memory institutions in general, so they simply do not have the tools for the moment.
Taking an example also from another area, that not only smaller institutions that can have problems. In my home city, Stockholm, the city of Stockholm took a very, very wise decision that the city archives actually should be the archives for all the administration as a close archive, taking the files directly. And these are text files mostly. And they say, okay, it's no problem, we take it in PDF-A. And this is a 1 million inhabitant city, so it's quite big. And they got as many variations of PDF-A as there are parts in this city, actually. So they have quite a huge problem. They had PDF-A, but it was not the same. Everyone has interpreted it in a different way, and it was more or less, well, it was not impossible. They have huge problems to handle it. They tried to test it and say, okay, we can see then what it is. But when they are using different tools, they get different results. So that wasn't that funny. And this is an e-archiving problem. This is not so this is what's happened now when you're talking about e-government. We have lots of files now that are coming together, and everyone is using the same format, they think, but they are different interpretations. So it's not only small cultural heritage institutions that have this problem. This is something that is very, very important also for people working with e-governments. This is a very, very practical problem, actually. So I hope it's an answer where you a little bit of it.
Just one comment. Would it be possible if if we collect some of these broken files, just the example files, it would be good from the end users already getting like the different PDF-A formats or the different because you are the customers and you like to get this handled. Maybe there's a way to consolidate the different PDF-A versions already. As far as I know, there are a lot of proprietary software out there who's doing the digitalization. So we do not know what PDF-A or what broken PDF is out there. It might be nice to have several versions on the website if it's possible.
Well, Peter here tried to explain the different kind of test data, etc., etc. And I think you can get it there. But I suppose your question is about getting it before you are giving in the tender.
As soon as possible, yes.
Okay. We haven't thought about that actually, but well, we take it.
Thank you.
I can't promise anything, but it's something we have to check. This is one of the things. That's why we have this information day, to get innovative questions and ideas from you. Well, yeah, that could be one idea actually to show you exactly how bad it is. Okay. We have another questions. There's a microphone coming around.
Thank you. I am from a firm producing software, so we are maybe some of the suppliers it can be. What is the? I think there are three kind of aims now: producing a software which can be spread everywhere in Europe, producing a complete solution with support, with customer support, or producing a framework with solutions and standards and other things from which software can be prepared or from which standards coming. So what is the main, when we won this tender and we produce something, what will be what in the future? It will be a software which will be supported by your consortium, or we should support it, or what will be done with the product?
Okay. We are a project, which means that the project will end. But what we actually aiming at, and that was also what Björn was talking about, think about what's happened year after. And first of all, this is an open source, which means that we see that it should survive independently if the project as such is there, the big, I don't remember what Antonella called it, the big umbrella thing there. The format. The other thing is that we need to have some sort of group actually working with it, and that is one of the ideas also to see that there will be some sort of interest group that how we work with it, and the aim is that it should survive the project. This is something that will live. So these instruments are very vital actually, but there will be no owner, so to speak, of this. This is something that we can give the possibilities and the conditions for something, and say that this is what we think should survive. This is some groups that are interested in this, but it's also a question for if it's come to the products itself. If you can manage to in the end have good results which you can put on the market, that is the best guarantee that it will survive. I see. Actually. But we can just support it with open source. Say this is very important, and also to have some sort of a group that will go on working with this. This is the two things. And this group which I talk about, you mentioned a little bit about it, but you can maybe mention it more, because people are interested in this, and who are interested though.
There is also a slide that was presented by Bert earlier this morning. We imagine that there is one way to exploit the results of the project, that is for a commercial company to take the result, to package it into its own existing product, and to sell it with his own property on the packaged solution. Because the result is open source, so everybody can use it into its own development. A second strand is that this open source software is used by the memory institutions and integrated into their own legacy system. In this case, the business model for the suppliers is to sell support services in order to integrate the software into the legacy system. And the third model that we have envisaged for the exploitation is that in the workflow of the memory institution or institutions, as we have heard from Bori, the institutions are often interlinked. There could be a network of different memory institutions, and they would need to have this conformance check to be integrated into a networked workflow. And this needs, again, support services. So these are basically the three ways that we imagine can happen. You have to talk in the mic, yes. Please.
Just to complete the model, that's another way is, okay, we built now a conformance checker with dealing with one particular format I can imagine, and that's a discussion we had in the consortium. Also, okay, we have a whole list of formats, and not all of them we're able to deal with here in this project. So we can perfectly imagine that a memory institution or a supplier takes the core of the functionality of the conformance checker and adds a new conformance checker to it, and which may be licensed in its own proprietary license, but he uses the work that has already been done and develops additional checkers for another file format. So that was in addition.
To this regard, there was a nice picture in the slide presented by Bert. Yeah, that is this one. And here you see that there is now in the tender we will develop a limited number of conformance checkers because we have a limited amount of money to be spent, a limited time, and we want to enable competition. So at the end we imagine, if everything goes in the direction that we have planned, to have 3 conformance checkers fully developed and tested, and 3 shells, that is the interface between the core software and the user interface, the legacy system or the proprietary tools or the networked workflow. What Bert said is that in addition to the 3 conformance checkers and the 3 shells developed by the 3 winners who developed the whole process from the design to the testing, we imagine that maybe already at the end of the design, those who provided the design and did not win the prototyping can go ahead with the prototyping of other conformance checkers. You have seen another another slide where we have more than 3 standards to be checked. This comes from as a requirement from the memory institutions. So we know that the memory institutions would like these conformance checkers, at least, maybe more. There is maybe more that we didn't put in this slide because otherwise it becomes too wide. But there is a request from the market. So we imagine that in addition to the 3 ones that we will select to be funded until the end of the testing, there will be other possibilities of other conformance checkers to be developed. And so this is a 4th line of exploitation of the results.
Thank you. Okay, now we have a number. I don't know who was the first here. Was it you the first? Well, we take you first. Yeah. And then we have you.
Hello, my name is Jamal Lucas from Athena Innovation Center. I have a question about the scope of the project. If the scope of the project includes conformance checkers about the metadata of the digital object, have you think about this? If it includes metadata conformance checking.
Depends what you mean with metadata.
Metadata, the definition model of the digital objects who you archive.
Okay, because the metadata, if you look upon it from the repository point of view, we have the metadata, which we already have in standardized formats, which are provided by organizations where professionals are handling it. And there are some sort of, well, have other projects who are working to and mapping different formats in Europeana, for example, and so on. So I think metadata in that sense is covered, so to speak. So we are interested in data here. But on the other hand, you need metadata about what is happening. I think Bert was showing something about that. That kind of metadata that we needed to be sure what is happening. I don't remember which slides it was, but you maybe can show it again.
About metadata, we have also technical metadata of who describes the data objects.
Yeah.
And we have also semantic metadata who maybe they are covered from another project.
Yeah.
The question is if the scope of this project asks conformance checkers of any kind of metadata, or we're focused just only on the digital objects.
It's metadata in the sense you're talking, that is normally covered by the OS model actually, but metadata, let me show you the slides.
I don't know which slide you meant. The answer that I would have is that we deal with metadata as far as it's embedded in the file. That's the first answer. And of course there's metadata, also descriptive metadata, administrative metadata can be added in the header of a file or whatever. But there are two things. So we only talk about metadata for as far as they're embedded, and the other one is you saw this slides where you had the implementation checker. Our concern here is that we start from a formal standard document and that we can guarantee, if we check it with this module, that you get exactly deal where it complies with the specification. If the specification is precise on metadata, that will be checked. Then it will be checked. In reality, we see very often, for example, in the case of TIFF, that it's very open. So the specification does not say a lot about the metadata in the TIFF file. So if you get a report from the implementation checker for a TIFF file, okay, you get a lot of information, but not so much about the metadata. And in practice, preservation of TIFF files is most of the time about how the metadata elements are defined in the header. So that's why we included the policy checker, which allows for adding additional criteria to further narrow or I should say elaborate the specification and do more precise checking. Most of the time specifications that are not in the standard specification but are important for long-term preservation by memory institutions. I don't know if that covers part of your question at least.
So I think, because of your answer, there is an open area to examine or to touch the metadata according to the implementation checker.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is that open spot? What?
It's an open item. I mean that we can think, we can create on this.
Indeed.
Offer on this.
Indeed.
Okay.
That's part of the research we expect from you. Okay. But also the interaction with memory institutions or repositories that still have demands on additional, which still have additional metadata requirements which are not in the spec but which are important for long-term preservation.
It will be imported, it will be proceed.
Yeah, that's something that should be involved in the whole research. That's specifically, I know the case for TIFF very well. Specifically for that format, that's a huge issue. We expect a lot of research to be done on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. My question is quite similar to yours. It's you spoke about preservation of the digital assets, but preservation is relevant only if you can provide an access to the information that is contained into the data. So I'm talking about semantic indexation. So no metadata, but semantic indexation. Is this also in scope of the project? This is what we're talking about, or was it something different? About, like, for example, if you have hundreds of videos, you index it by saying, okay, in this video mentions Barack Obama, this video talks about France, and etc. So semantic indexation, is this scope of the project or not?
Our current idea about including this kind of descriptive metadata in the file and use it for indexation, I know that's an issue if you should do it from a preservation point of view or not. So my first idea would be that it would not be like in the core of the project, because you're not dealing with actual preservation data or data that relates to migration or whatever. At least if I understood well, that you're actually talking about descriptive metadata for identifying the content. That's what you're asking for. Yeah. I think to a certain extent this is not real. To my opinion, the core of what we're basically dealing with. But I see Magnus.
Just because
coming closer. Yeah.
As I imagine it, the actual file format, they have a capability in the header to contain a lot of different technical metadata, but also descriptive metadata. But that is still in a certain format. And if a conformance checker in first phase reports everything, what's in, then the policy checker could be a capability to, if a certain institution want to add a special analyze a part of the contained metadata, that could be done in the policy checker if they want to check if it's follow a special descriptive standard or something like that. But that's sort of the second phase, which could be a bit optional. Could that be a good description?
An example that was coming to my mind for the moment is the work that is currently being done on including EPU core data in MXF wrappers in order to identify in a standard way contextual data for audiovisual resources. That's an interesting idea. Indeed, what Magnus said, I agree that's something that belongs to the part of the policy checker. But as for now, what I can say, our main concern is actually what is happening in the implementation checker. And if I can say one thing very clear here about this now, is that we consider adding specifications in the compliance, in the policy checker, for as far as it's fully compliant with the standard specification. That's really important for us. So this project is really about checking what is in the standards. And of course, as has been said today, none of the standards is complete or perfect. So part of this dialogue we want to settle, this ecosystem, is also the negotiation on first what should be in the policy checker, and in the next step, are there things in the policy checker that should perhaps be a part of the specification. So at a certain moment can be going feedback, it can go back as feedback to the people that maintain the standard. So the reason I'm anxious to say yes, it's about, and specifically if you say indexing, and the whole issue of indexing this information, I think that's a step further. That's not what we're really, what I feel that we're not really targeting, but what we might consider is to what extent we have to include these additional contextual metadata fields in a preservation format, because that's another issue. We're talking here about files specifically for preservation, which in some cases might be different from files that you use for reproduction or for access, where your topic indexing of metadata is really valuable and interesting to research. Okay.
So how can the final users, when they are going to search for a specific data, how would they find it using metadata such as the file format, the duration, this kind of properties?
I think you should be clear that users in this context are people that maintain or manage digital repositories. It can be full-fledged digital MUM systems and everything. That can be a computer with a hard drive in some cases. So we have to target their concerns. And what you also see in the OI's reference model is that the whole thing about metadata and making digital objects, finding digital objects or searching for objects is different from the whole Preservation Act. So most of the time these functions are separated. So that's why I can imagine for access copies, if you consider users as end users or people working in the production environment working with content, then it's really important. But if we talk about users here, we're really talking about people that are maintaining, managing digital repositories, and most of the time the metadata is handled outside in a separate database.
Taking for granted what Bert already said, that the users of these products are the memory institutions who maintain the digital archives. However, I have not exactly the same opinion as you on the question, on the reply to the question, because I think that the check of the conformancy of the metadata that are correlated with the formats of the files are a component of what we want to preserve, because the archive are the files that should be well formed with the metadata that are included in the files that should be well formed, with the optional metadata that are established by the policies of each memory institution that should be well formed, and the descriptive metadata, because more and more the archives are not only the files, but they are also descriptive metadata. This is not an area that we have fixed, where we leave open to the suppliers to make proposals. So my interpretation is that the best is the first reply that we gave and that you suggested, that is, this is the area of the research where the different proposals can establish their competitiveness. I mean, in the available budget, but adding something to the basic, that is the minimum requirement, which is the conformance of the files in the formats that we have listed, more or less.
I think Antonella just answered part of my question, so thank you. But how is this thing going to be disseminated, and how common do you envisage it will become? Would it be a de facto standard for memory institutions, and how long would it take for this to be adopted commonly, roughly?
I think that it is not a standard in terms of a standard of a new file. It is a best practice.
Yes, exactly.
So it is a way to address the conformance check. And we have a program of dissemination that is based on the 2 workshops, one to the open source community and the other targeted to the memory institutions. We have a final conference with the booth where there will be public demonstrations. We have a website that will be used to promote what is happening. And if there are other suggestions, other proposals of dissemination in the proposals from the suppliers, in the offers from the suppliers, they will be another component to make competitive your offer.
Well, the reason why I asked was basically it's a fantastic opportunity. If this has to become a de facto standard for operations with files, when you're checking the conformity of a file, why not use the same operation to check for the meta information, the descriptive meta information, or allow people to enter the meta information in this particular process? Because you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone in such a situation, which would make this so beautiful.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought that you have, actually, more like a dream. And but when it comes to the market, we can see that as I said when I started to talk here, that from the beginning I was not sure that this was an idea that could be heavy enough for a project like this. But I was convinced very shortly, because there's a lot of institutions that were in contact with us and said, yes, we need this. This is exactly what we need. And this is something that is holding a lot of things back now. And that's why I try to say not only the memory institutions, but also in e-government. This is a practical problem that has to be solved. The question is then, shall we also, when we have a chance, solve something else? And as Antonella said, it's a little bit up to you also to see that opportunity. We are limited also by being a European projects, which means we have promised the Commission to do something. We have a contract with them and are giving money for doing something else. So they are not so keen sometimes if we try to solve the rest of the world's problem. But if it's a good thing and you can see that it's something that make this better, then it's something to take into account. One important thing, although which I can hear from the discussion here when we talk about data, metadata, etc., that as was stressed in the beginning, the basic here model is the OS model, which means if you are not familiar with that model, please look until it's a standard, it's a conceptual model, and it's talk about packages. You have information packages where you have standards for metadata, etc. And a number of institutions are using this model, and everyone now in the archival world are talking about SIPs, submission information packages, how it look like. My SIP has this standard, your SIP has this, etc. There's a lot of model going on. And the same also with the archive information package. How are you working? So we can see there some good best practice coming in there. There are suppliers coming in that areas and try to give solutions. But when it comes to the dissemination, we are not that far yet, actually. So there are best practice also in this sense. So please, when we are talking, we have the OS model. We are square in that sense. That's the model that we are used, and it's very helpful because it normally helps me to understand technicians and technicians to understand me. So that's what we have. But well, this is part of an answer to you. That it depends what you will give us in a tender. Okay, more questions. We have some very good ones now, and we would like more good ones. Here's one more coming in. You need a mic.
Concerning the reporter, what is it exactly? What is it supposed to report?
Shall Bert answer that?
And what about the feedbacks? You also mentioned generate useful feedbacks.
I'll answer the question as to the reporter first. Well, from the talks with the memory institutions, they requested, okay, we want something that checks consistently, comprehensively this specification, and then was the question, in what form do you want to get it back? And actually we distinguish between like machine readable outputs, which you can use to send it to another system that might transcode the file or repackage the file. So it's a topic of research to find how this machine readable output should look like and how you should make it available, for example, via APIs. And how do you design these APIs? So that's an interesting subject. But then there are also institutions that said, okay, some of these tools exist already, and they provide wonderful XML scheme, JSON schemes with a lot of input, which is hardly to make any interpretation out of it. And actually what I, in my museum, sometimes have to do is just to go have a report and go to my photographer and convince him finally to follow the right specs when he takes a picture of a work of art or when he puts something on a scanner. Because much of institutions internally are discussing where is the quality level of digital files. And most of the time there's a huge difference between like technicians, producers of files, who are into capturing as much information as possible, and the digital preservationist who is about, okay, store it in one way that I'm sure that I can manage it. That the extent is that's not too big, the file is not too big, and that I'm able to migrate it in the future. So we have, within some of these institutions, huge discussions between like technicians, people producing files, and people responsible for preserving the files. So in one way or another, it would be very useful if this same tool, who does this very comprehensive technical analysis, that he provides in one way or another human readable feedback, which can be used in going into discussion and feedbacking back not to standardization but also to producers of files. Or something that you can use for doing quality assessment in a kind of digitization tender. So that's what I mean on one end by machine readable output, which you can send to another machine who's doing any preservation action, and which you can also use to store it as part of the preservation metadata. But there's another challenge, which is about finding a way of translating this into a human readable format so organizations can do quality control and generate improvements or feed improvement processes within their organization. That's one part. If you say feedbacking back to standardization organizations, I can explain it as someone who's much better in that. So I would like to ask Bjorn to explain in detail in which way that this project or you as a supplier could work to indeed what we said, send that feedback to standardization organizations and involve in discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Bert just said, but to add to that, I mean, the machine readable output could be seen as a way by which you can provide feedback and use as a basis for your proactive involvement with the standardization organization, so that the quality of the standard in the next round is better, so that the other tools developed based on that will stop producing bad files. because feedback to other producers can be handled by large public sector organizations, typically, that has adopted a lot of files based on other software that has generated the files in the first place. So I see that this kind of output from the report can go in many different directions. I mean, you need to push via those that adopted it, so that you get better input to the memory institution in the first place, to try to build a cycle of avoiding the problem, so to say. Because in some countries, I mean, as been explained earlier, there are the scenario where in certain countries you can mandate use of specific file formats, and then you need to have this input as a mechanism for driving up the quality, both with respect to the suppliers of the software that generated the files in the first place, but also to the standardization organizations as well. So it's a way of ensuring interoperability in the long term. I don't know, Bert, if you would like to add on that, but yeah, being proactive in that process, trying to have a proactive approach for that. So, yeah.
We have who was first? I think you. Okay, you can take it first. Yeah. You have a mic coming in there.
It's a part of the previous question. As we know, to improve a standard is a painful procedure with pre-standard committees, standard committees. All this is time-consuming and painful procedure. But I think that when we say about active involvement to improve the standards, ends at the good report, who gives directions and technical details, and not in the consulting of this process. Consulting, I mean, for the pre-standard and the standard committees of the standardization bodies. Is that clear?
Yeah. Shall we?
The question is where the work stops.
When the work, yes, I understand.
That sounds clear, but I think for now the focus should be that first of all we produce the inputs, the research results, and write the proposals. The question, what will be the next step? Entering into a whole procedure with standardization committee, and who will address that, and who will visit the meetings, and who will be involved in it. I can't answer that question. You've seen the list of standards, so you can already guess which organizations are involved there. But you also see that not for all the standards that we have listed there, the question is that easy to answer. And that's an exercise that we're currently making. And we're working on it for 2 months now. We need another couple of weeks to come up with a strategy. So at the moment of publication of the tender, that we can be more precise on what you were asking, that we can explain from how far we expect you to go in that process and participate. But it should be clear that it's part of your role. Thus we will ask you definitely to go at least some way on that road. But how far it depends on for each standard specification in each situation, definitely. And that question I can't answer for you for the moment, but we're working on this now. Thank you.
It's interesting that you call it painful process. Okay, we have over there a question. I think it's what we all can agree upon. It's sometimes it feels very painful. It's very long. Okay, please.
Earlier we talked about that there were corrupt files from the institutions that might be provided. A second part of a specialized case is now the standard problems. It would be nice if the already known problems of standards might be listed as good as possible. So people could estimate what efforts have to be taken there. And my name is Schubert, by the way, on the list, and I'm working on standards. I'm working on ODF file formats, but also in DIN and ISO. And for those who don't know, in the SC34, the zip is going to be standardized because Microsoft Office, the OXML, and OpenOffice, the ODF format, both using zip, but zip is proprietary. It's just an implementation node, so the ISO is not very happy about that. And we talked about earlier zip. So, for instance, this is going to be standardized, and if we know what problems are existing, we might estimate if it's easy, like a W3C standard, or it's difficult, it's a ISO standard, then yeah. And I'm willing to help if somebody needs.
Okay, it means that we have already started the interaction with the standardization of scoring organizations. Yeah, that's very good. You see, that's the process, the painful process, have already started. Yes, I think we haven't talked so much about it, but I think it's an idea that we have to take with us actually and see if we can map the problem, because it's not, of course, very easy, or it's easy at least to do some sort of solution if you can practically see what the problem is. But if you look into the basic part, this is very practical actually. This is not working. The standard is maybe okay, but the use of the standard is a problem for me working in a repository or someone else also. But we can see what we can do actually in this. We have examples, but you're right. The institutions today have said this is a problem, and eventually not talk so much about the exact definition of it. Okay, we have another question.
We have talked about standards, but only at the point of the formats we want to support. But there are also the standards like the QC standardization at the EBU, which try to standardize the way how to make the quality checking of audiovisual media. They have controlled vocabularies. They have defined testing, how to do that. They have to describe in detail how to do it. So the question is not only to help with the standards we have in the files, we also have to look that we look and help with supporting standards, helping the migration process, and going also on that route to an open standard way. So, for example, with our work with the film standard, we do the QC as part, and with the EBU we do the same open standards, and they are very uncritical because they are public available. All the documentation is available online, so it really fits very well with the approach of that project. So I want to mention not only focus on the standards of describing the file formats, also focusing on emerging standards for helping migration processes and standard the way how to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Antonella, have a comment.
A small comment. I think that also what you said is a part of the competitive added value of your proposal. Because the minimum requirement, we had to establish minimum requirements, otherwise the call was too vague. And the minimum requirements is on standards for file formats. But what you said, I think, is similar to what we discussed before on the metadata. Certainly also other standards for other workflows or other aspects of the documentation of the digital assets are relevant, and there you play your competitive added value.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 1 o'clock now, so I think we have reached the time for lunch. And it's not my intention not to stop the discussion. No, after lunch, when you get something in your stomach, you can go on discussing and talk with the consortium after here. And I hope you have listed yourself on Barbara's list here, so then you can go more into details if you have questions. So thank you for coming and listening to this. Myself and Antonella and others, we have to go another place, but there were plenty of people here to answer your questions and discuss more in details. Thank you for this morning, and now we have lunch. Thank you.